Today's daf is daf tes. We're going to start 6 lines down from the top. We said that marriage during Chol Moed is prohibited. Ein ma'arvin, we don't intermingle joy with joy. How do we know this? What's the source for this? The Chsiv, with regard to the Chanukas HaMikdash, which is recorded in Malachim Aleph, Perek Ches, with regard to the Beis HaMikdash that was built by Shlomo HaMelech, and the pasuk says, "Vayas Shlomo be'eis ha'hiyas hachag," and Shlomo declared a celebration for the Chanukah Beis HaMikdash. For Kol Yisrael imo kahal gadol, the pasuk describes a great, huge congregation of Israel that was with him. And they stretched from Levo Hamas ad Nachal Mitzrayim. V'lifnei Hashem Elokeinu, Shivas Yomim, B'Shivas Yomim, Arbasa Yom, 7 days and 7 days, all told 14 days. When actually did this 7 plus 7 two-part celebration take place? 7 days before Chag HaSukkos, and we'll see that includes Yom Kippur. Hold on with that. And then during Sukkos, there was Simcha, not because of Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash, but because of V'samachta b'chagecha. V'yem isa dema'arvim simcha b'simcha, the Gemara is going to argue from the opposite perspective. Let's say you would assume that you can add one simcha onto the other and intermingle them. Then, iboile lemintar arachag, why couldn't Shlomo Melech simply postpone the celebration of the Chanukah's HaMikdash until the Chag, and me'evet shiva lahacha ulahacha? Let the 7 days of Chag HaSukkos be a double celebration. On the one hand, for the Beis HaMikdash, and the other hand, for Chag HaSukkos. And what's motivating the Gemara, and in the logic of the thinking of the Gemara, would motivate Shlomo Melech to overlap the two, if not for the problem of Ein Ma'arvin? Tosfos points out that Shlomo Melech would want to limit the amount of Bitul Malacha, because during the Yemei HaSimcha and the Chag for Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash, there was no Malacha permitted. And we want to limit the amount of imposition and restriction regarding to Malacha. That's why we have only 3 aliyos during the weekday, not more. You can't add, because we don't want to be Mavatal Malacha. The Gemara asks the following question: V'dilma mintar lo natrinon. How do you know that Shlomo Melech could have had even an option of delaying the Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash until Sukkot and have them overlap, assuming that Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha? Maybe that's not an option. Whenever he completed the Beis HaMikdash, immediately, urgently, without delay, you have to establish the Chanukah, the Chag of celebration. So Gemara says, "Iboile l'shirei purta." Even though I grant you your premise that you cannot postpone and delay the Chag that celebrates the building of the Beis HaMikdash, he could have left out part of the Beis HaMikdash, and instead of completing the entire building, the entire structure, he could have left a little bit until right before Chag HaSukkos, and then again, it could have been an overlap. Why didn't Shlomo Melech take advantage of that logic and that system? And then he would certainly cut down Bitul Malacha, and by a week, it would only be during the Chag. The only answer is because Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha. Gemara says, wait a minute, I don't think that logic is correct. I don't think that Shlomo Melech had the option of even delaying the completion of the structure of the Mikdash, because Shirei Binyan Beis HaMikdash Lo Misharinon. We do not delay the complete construction of the Mikdash. If all the pieces of the puzzle are there, and you're just missing one last Makah B'Patish, then that's exactly what you do. So now the Gemara is going to look for an argument that would justify our proof, our derivation from the fact that Shlomo Melech was compelled to have 7 days of celebration before Chag, because of Ein Ma'ariv and Simcha B'Simcha. And if not for Ein Ma'ariv and Simcha B'Simcha, he could in fact have delayed the entire Simcha of Beis HaMikdash until Sukkot itself, if not for Ein Ma'ariv and Simcha B'Simcha. Iboile l'shirei bi'ama kalya orev. There's something called an ama kalya. And what that means is that on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, because of the very pleasant aroma, very strong aroma of the karbanos that's going up towards the top, it would attract birds, crows, and they had to keep away the crows. So what they did was, with a width of 1 amma, they would cover that part of the roof with iron plates that was studded with spikes, and that would keep the crows away. And although that would have to be there in order to clinch and complete the Beis HaMikdash, but it wasn't part of the actual structure. And therefore, Shlomo Melech would have had the option of delaying, putting up these spikes, the Amma, what's it called again? The Amma Kalya Orev, meaning getting rid of the Orvim and so forth. And the Gemara refutes this as well. The Gemara says, Amma Kalya Orev Tzorech Binyan Bayasid. You can't delay that either. That's also considered a critical part of the Beis HaMikdash, even though it's not the mechitzos that generate kedusha, but nevertheless, it is necessary to protect the Mikdash, and anything necessary to protect the Mikdash is part of the broader definition of Binyan Beis HaMikdash, and it encompasses that as well. And therefore, he could not delay that. If the Beis HaMikdash was complete a week before Sukkot, he would have to add the Amakalya Orev and complete the Beis HaMikdash, and that's when he had to celebrate the Chag. So you don't have any proof from which you could derive the conclusion of Ein Ma'ariv Simcha B'Simcha. Ella, we're going to derive the conclusion of Ein Ma'ariv Simcha B'Simcha miyater kra, from the extra pasuk. Ksiv arba asar yom. The pasuk says that it was 14 days of celebration. Shivas yom, shivas yom lamali. Why did the Tanakh, have to specify 7 days plus another 7 days? The Torah is trying to teach us that Shema Mina, Hani L'chut v'Hani L'chut, that you don't overlap the 2 7-day periods, one of which is for the Chanukas and Chag HaSimcha of Beis HaMikdash, and the other is for Chag HaSimcha. Amar Rav Parnach, Amar Rav Yochanan, Osa Shana Lo Osu Yisrael Es Yom HaKippur. Because of the celebration of the Chanukas HaMikdash, which would be eating and drinking, and all the merriment involved, they violated, so to speak, Yom HaKippurim. Because again, 7 days before the Chag of Sukkot has, by definition, overlaps with Yom HaKippurim. Maybe this is a euphemism for Klal Yisrael. Maybe they deserve to be destroyed, because of this tremendous violation of eating and drinking on Yom HaKippurim. Yata Baskal V'Amra, a heavenly voice declared, Kulchem Uzumanim L'chai Olam Haba. The Gemara is going to prove from this that there was no violation at all, and there was no need for Mechila. So the Gemara says, "My darush taka." How did they allow this to go on? Let's say it came up in front of the Sanhedrin Agdola. On what basis did they conclude and derive the halacha that you're allowed to eat on Yom Kippur itself within the framework of the Simcha and the Chagiga, the celebration of the Binyan Beis HaMikdash? Amru Kal V'chomer. They derive it from a Kal V'chomer. Now, at this point in the Kal V'chomer, we're going to compare Mishkan and Migdash. And in the light of that analogy, we're going to conclude that certainly you would override Yom Kippur for the sake of Chanukas HaMikdash. Ma Mishkan, she'ein kedushas or kedushas olam. If we compare the sanctity of the Mishkan to that of the Mikdash, it falls short. It's only a temporary sanctity. The permanent sanctity was only in the Beis HaBechira that was established by Shlomo HaMelech. And yet, nevertheless, even though the Kedusha of Mishkan is on a lower ebb, lower flame, and not only that, the Nesiim brought their korbanos at the Chanukas HaMishkan for 12 days. The Karban Yachid. Each Nasi brought it as his own personal, private contribution, and yet Doches Shabbos. Every karma requires the Chiyas Shabbos, and many malachas involved in bringing a karma, not the least of which is Shechita, which is the Dilas Neshama. And yet, for the sake of the Mishkan and its Chanukah, to dedicate the Mishkan, which is again on a lower level of Kedusha, they would violate the Shabbos. Now comes the Kal Vachomer, Migdash, the Kedushas, Kedushas Olam. If now you're going to violate Yom Kippur for the sake of a higher level of Kedusha, a Kedushas Olam, an eternal Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, and it's a Karban Tzibur. In other words, the Karbanos that they brought as part of the Chanukas Beis HaMikdash, or Karbanos Tzibur, which is again on a higher level than a Karban Yachid, and Yom HaKippurim, which is on a lower level than Shabbos, it's only Onish Kares, Lo Kolshke. How much more so could they override the Chiyuv Kares, the Isa Kares of Yom HaKippurim for the sake of Migdash, which is Kedusha Olamis? So Gemara says if that logic is so compelling, and based on this Kal Vachomer, they derive the het of the leniency to eat and drink on Yom Kippur that year, is Elamai Hayudo. Why were they so anxious about it? Where answers Hassam, there's a little bit of a pircha on this Kal Vachomer. Tzorech Gavoah. When you're talking about Karbanos, they are brought on the Mizbeach, Reich Nichoch Lashem, that's called Tzorech Gavoah. But Hacha, when you talk about eating and drinking and celebrating, Tzorech Hejo, it's not elevated to the status of a Karban. So you're right, for a Karban, you could override even Shabbos, and even in the Kedusha, relatively Kedusha Kal of Mishkan, but in the case of eating and drinking, that's not a Karban. That's not Tzorech Gavoah. How do you know that that would override Yom Kippur? So that's what generated this anxiety. Maybe the Kal Vachomer is not so faultless and not as reliable as it looks on the surface. Gemara asks, Hachanami mi eved li avdo. Why couldn't they bring karbanos at the time of the celebration of Shlomo Melech's Beis HaMikdash and drop it as far as Achil and Shasi is concerned? As far as karbanos, would be a Karban Tzibur, and for sure it would override Yom Kippur, is Mechal or Nichel Lichnu. What prompted them and compelled them to eat and drink as part of the celebration? Leave that out. Why not do, instead of a Torah Hejo, do a Torah Kavod and bring karbanos? And Gemara answers, Ein Simcha b'lo achilu shasiyah. I'm sure there are profound layers of meaning here, but just on a surface level, Simcha requires achilu and shasiyah. And therefore they knew that if they were being Mekayim in the midst of Simcha, at the time of the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo, they certainly had to eat and drink. Now, I'm wondering why at the time of the Mishkan we don't find any emphasis on Achil and Shasiyah, but only the Nesiim bringing each one individually their own Karban Yachid. I don't know. In any event, the Kal Vachomer was based on the fact that in Mishkan they would Docha Shabbos, that one or the other of the Nesiim, I don't know which Nasi it was, but he brought a Karban Yachid on Shabbos. Mishkan the Dochi Shabbos Minolan. The very underlying premise of your Kal V'chomer is that on Mishkan, they violated Shabbos. How do you know that? If you're going to tell me, because in the Parashat of Chanukas HaMishkan and the Nesiim, it says by Yom HaRishon of Yom HaShvi, in other words, Yom HaShvi means Shabbos, they brought the carbon even on the seventh day, which is Shabbos, and they override the Shabbos for the sake of this carbon. No. I can be very argumentative about that. Dilma Shvi lekarbanos. Maybe the word Shvi here means the seventh in the sequence of the karbanos. It doesn't have to be Shabbos. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Omar Krab Yom HaShtei Asar Yom, on the 11th day. Ma Yom Kula Ratzuf. Af HaShtei Asar Kula Ratzufim. The 11 days were Ritzufim. Ritzufim means they were contiguous, one day after the other, which by definition would override would overlap with Shabbos. Gemara says, "V'dilma yomim hara'uyim." Maybe when the Torah says the extra word yom, it's telling you that we're talking about a yom that's roy for a carbon, and we're talking about a carbon yachid, but not on Shabbos. My answer is ksiv kra achrina. Another pasuk says the yom shnei masar yom, on the 12th day. Again, the extra word yom. It could have said the yom shnei masar. Why the yom shnei masar yom? My yom kula ratzuf. Just like a day flows 24 hours consecutively. Af shnei masar yom kulo mertufim. Kulo mertufim means that if you had 12 tribal leaders, each one bringing a carbon consecutively on 12 days, it must by definition override the Shabbos. How do you know? Maybe it means Yom here, like we said before when we got Tashtei Mitzvah, that it means a roy to bring a carbon, but not on Shabbos. In Kain Trei Kroy, Lomali, why did the Torah have to repeat itself Yom in Ashtei Asar Yom in Shnei Masar? It must be teaching us that these are Ritzufim, they're consecutive days, and they override the Shabbos. How do we know that for the sake of the Chanukas HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, you can override Yom Kippur? In other words, maybe, we have a Kal V'chomer, but how do we know before that they actually implemented that Kal V'chomer? Elam, if you'll say Michsiv Har Basar Yom, and it says that they celebrated for 14 days, maybe it's Dilma Yom Maruyim. It's only days that are right, to the exclusion of Yom HaKippur, which is not fit for Achila and Shasia. Kamar Yom Yomei Hasam. We have Xer Shava that takes us back to the Chanukas HaMishkan, and just like in Chanukas HaMishkan, we're talking about consecutive days. So to here, with regard to the celebration of the Beis HaMikdash at the time of Shlomo, it is 14 consecutive days. And if it's 14 consecutive days, then by definition, we go back 7 days before Sukkot, which has to overlap with Yom HaKippur, and they ate and drank on Yom HaKippur. Yotza Baskal V'Yomra Kulchem Mizumanim L'Chai Olam Haba Minolan Diachale. How do we know that they really got full mechila, as if they hadn't sinned when they ate and drank on Yom Kippur? Tani Tachlifa. We have a brisa that was taught by Tachlifa, based on the pasuk in Malachim Aleph that we quoted before. B'Yom HaShmini Shilach Es Ha'am Vayevarchu Es HaMelech. On the 8th day, they took leave from the king and they blessed the king. Vayelchu li'oleihem smechim v'tovei. They went back to their tents, joyful and in a state of gladness. For all the goodness that God had bestowed for David, his servant, and for his people Israel. And now we're going to go through every phrase in this pasuk in Darshan. Le'alehem shaholchu matzon Hashem b'tara. They found that their wives, each one was b'tara, and they could resume their intimate relationships with their wives. Smechim, enenu miziv hashchina. When you're uplifted by an encounter with the Shekhinah itself, the radiance of God, then you reach a level of simcha. Like David HaMelech says in Tehillim Lamed Beis, Simchu b'Hashem, or V'Melech Yismach B'Elokim. V'tovei leiv, shekol echad v'echad nis'abra ish tov b'ben zochar. Tov, like we saw by Moshe Rabbeinu when he was born, by V'teres Hatino Kitovu, Tayel Kitovu, Tov is a ben zochar. So as a result, they returned home to their wives, they had an intimacy, and their wives conceived each one a baby boy. Must have been a boom of baby boys that year. Al kol hatova, sheyatsa baskal v'yomalem kulka mizumanim l'chay olam haba. Tova means the ultimate good, which is chay olam haba, and that proves clearly that Hashem was mochel. Once the Gemara quotes his pasuk, the Gemara says, "David avdol Yisrael amo, v'isleim Yisrael amo." The pasuk is telling you the achalu b'avon Yom Kippur. The Torah wants to tell you that there was total forgiveness for their sin of eating on Yom Kippur. David avdo maihi. What's the goodness and the forgiveness of David avdo? What's it doing here? Rabbi Yehuda Marav b'shasha bikei Shlomo lahachnis or lebikdash. After the Beis Hamikdash was completed, and now Shlomo wants to bring the Aron into the Beis Hamikdash through the gates of the Kodesh Kadoshim. Dovku shiarim zebazeh. The gates refused to open. They would not go up. Omar Shlomo, and Shlomo recited Esrim v'arba Rinonos. And if you go through the Psukim, you'll see, all told, 29 languages of Rinona, like Tchina, Tefillah, all different expressions, 24 different expressions of prayer, V'lo nana. And the gates remained closed. Pasach v'yomar. So Shlomo HaMelech recited the verse, Si'ushi orim rashechem usu piskei olam. Lo nana. Nevertheless, the gates remained closed. Came into Omar, but he said, Hashem Elokim, al toshev pnei mishichecha, zochra lechazdei David avdecha. Hashem, do not turn away the face of your anointed one. Remember the pieties of David, your servant, miyad nana. And then immediately the gates were open. So it's all b'schus David HaMelech. And that means that David HaMelech was forgiven for the sin of Bathsheba. Ubiosa shah nefru pnei sonei David kishulei kidera. The enemies of David turned dark. They were like depressed, like the bottom of a pot that you blacken when you turn on the fire. V'yadu hakol, because it was public knowledge now. Shemachala Kodesh Baruch Hu also that Hashem had forgiven David for the sin with Bathsheba. Rabbi Yonasan ben Asmai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, Tanu Parshas Nedorim, Bei Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So these two budding scholars, Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yehuda, were sitting at the feet of Rav Rashbi, of Rav Shimon bar Yochai, studying the laws of Nedorim. And Eiftar Minei Bi'ort. In the evening, they took leave. They said goodbye to their Rebbe. And it would seem that they were off on their way home. But L'tzafra, apparently they stayed overnight. In the morning, Hadar v'ka mafterei minoi. They came back to once again take leave of their Rebbe. Amala Hutzer of Shimon bar Yochai says to V'lo Terisu minei bi'orta, didn't you come already last night? Why do you feel compelled to come again today? Amrulei, and they said, Limadatanu Rabbeinu, you have taught us that Talmud sheniftar me'rab of alon ba'osa ir, if after the Talmud takes leave of his Rebbe, he, for whatever reason, decides to stay overnight in the city, he's got to come back before he leaves in the daytime, in the morning, and take leave from his Rebbe, Shenemar, and we derive from Shlomo Melech in that same parsha in Malachim Aleph Perek Ches of Chanukas Beis Hamikdash. It says, "Bayom Hashmini Shilach es ha'am v'yivarach es hamelech." So it seems that on the 8th day they took leave from the king, and they blessed the king. Zos habracha. And this pasuk is teaching us that Shlomo HaMelech granted the people permission to take leave on the 8th day, meaning the 8th day of Sukkot. Now, the 8th day of Sukkot is equal to the 22nd day in the month of Tishrei. Uksiv, uvayom esrim ushlosha, on the 23rd day, l'chodesh hashvi of Tishrei, shilach es ha'am. That's when Shlomo Melech said goodbye to the people. Now, wait a second. They'd already taken leave from Shlomo Melech on the 22nd, the day earlier. Why did they take leave again a second time on the 23rd? Elamikan, from this we derive, the Talmud, Anifta Mirabba, V'lon B'Osa'ir, Tzarchli Potter Menu Pamacheretz. He has come back the next morning when he actually leaves the city because he slept over in the city the night before. Now, at this point, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was very, very impressed by these two Talmidim. And Amalei Lebrei, he tells his son, B'nei Adam Halolu Anoshim Shel Tzurahem. These are people of stature. Zil Gabehun Dilivarchuch. Go get a bracha from them. Interesting. You see Talmidim that are on a level, the Rebbe sends his son to get a bracha from the Talmidim. Zil Gabehun, right. Also, Ashkechinu de Karamu Kroyadod. When he got there, the son of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, these two great scholars were busy with presenting and reconciling an apparent contradiction. Shlomo Melech says, "Pales ma'agal raglecha v'chol drachecha yikodu." Weigh the course of your feet, and all your ways will be established. What is this all about? There's some sort of weighing on a scale in order to make a decision. We've got two mitzvahs, and now he's got to decide which mitzvah to tend to. And he weighs them, as it says here, Pales Magal Raglecha, and then he will decide, Kol Drachecha Yikonu, how to establish his ways. He'll basically make a decision which mitzvah outweighs another mitzvah. You're like comparing two mitzvahs, even though we don't know the schar mitzvah of mitzvahs, but nevertheless, we're not motivated by schar mitzvah, but sometimes one mitzvah is clearly greater and more pressing than another mitzvah. And that's what you should do. You should be weighing these mitzvahs. On the other hand, uksiv, and right there in the same context of Mishlei, it says, Orach Chaim Pentaphalis. Pentaphalis means that you shouldn't be weighing these mitzvahs. If you have two mitzvahs before you, whichever mitzvah comes first, it appears you haven't started the mitzvah, because then it's also mitzvah. But whenever mitzvah comes your way first, that's what you should do, whatever is bali yadcha, so to speak. And we're not going to weigh the two mitzvahs. And now these two scholars who are, the son of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is waiting in the anteroom till they finish their whole pilpul so that they can ask for a bracha, so he can ask for a bracha from them. Now they give an answer and reconciling this apparent contradiction. And here on the top of Daf Tesam and Beis, kan b'mitzvah shehi efshar la'asos al yidei acherim. So if you have a mitzvah that can be performed by someone else, it's not you and only you. There's some sort of a communal achievement through the mitzvah. You can send someone else to do the mitzvah. I'm afraid to say that you can send a shliach, because shlichus and mitzvahs is very, problematic if it exists at all. So in such a case, you should choose the greater mitzvah for yourself, and the lesser mitzvah, send it in the hands of somebody else. But, and this is on the top of Testament Beis, when you have a mitzvah she'ef shal asosai be'acherim, you and only you can perform the mitzvah, then you perform the mitzvah as soon as it comes your way, and you don't make calculations and decide, weighing them, which mitzvah is greater than the other. Just be mekayim the first mitzvah that you possibly can.